One of the first steps in creating a website is to plan your site. This is one of the most important steps. So we're going to go over a few things to consider when planning your website. Some of the items to consider are the purpose of your website, the audience of your website, the layout that you want, the type of navigation, and the colors and theme. When talking about the purpose, this is the key to any website. You need to know why you are creating your site. Are you creating your site for a business? Are you creating it for just information? Do you want to create it for your family or just for fun? Maybe it's an educational site. You're wanting to teach somebody something. Also, there are other reasons for creating sites. But you need to have a purpose. The other thing you need to consider is what type of audience are you going to attract to your site, or who do you want to target to come to your site? Are you wanting to target clients such as people that buy products from you because it's a business website? Are you just wanting to attract your family and friends because you just want to do this for fun, or it's just an informational site? You can see that your audience is going back to the purpose of your site. Is the audience students? Are you teaching somebody something and so you want it to be your students? Also, you need to consider whether your audience is going to be a mixture of teens, adults, and children, or if it's just going to be targeted to one specific age group. The layout of your site is the next thing to consider after you know what your purpose is and the audience that you're trying to attract to your site. We need to look at how you want your pages laid out. The important thing to remember is to be consistent. It's important that you have a consistent theme throughout your website so that people know that they are still in your website and that they're not clicking outside of your website. Thus, it's just good design practice to be consistent with your layout. One type of layout that you could consider that seems to be kind of a trend is to have the logo header on the top with your navigation along the left-hand side and the main contents of your page in the center. Another option is to have your header and logo at the top and then your navigation and then your contact. There's lots of other varieties of layouts. The important thing is that you sketch your layout out. It's important to get a piece of paper and a pencil, draw out what you want your layout to look like. Make sure you include the key important items that you want on your site, such as the navigation, the header, the logo, the content, and if there's anything else like you want a movie, or just take a paper and pencil and sketch out your site. The next thing to consider is what type of navigation do you want? You should provide a clear and simple navigation system for your site, something that is easy for people to follow. They're not going to get confused and lost. One of the top reasons for leaving a website is when viewers are confused about where they want to go, or the navigation doesn't take them to where they think they're going. So this is an important factor, and we talked about this in the best design practices as well. Do you want your navigation to be linear, meaning that they follow a specific linear path, that, such as in a lesson, you're going to go from page 1 to page 2 to page 3 to page 4 in a lesson. Hierarchical is another type of navigation. This is where you have a main page and then 4 or 5 sub-pages and then sub-pages below each of those pages. This is kind of a popular navigation type. It's important to use flowcharts to help you set up your navigation. Once again, get out a paper and pencil, kind of sketch out how you want the flow of your site to go. Do you, like I said, do you want to go linear? Maybe it's a circular path. You want them to start and then end where they started. But use a flowchart to help sketch out the type of navigation you want. Another important thing when you're deciding on your navigation is how many pages are you going to have in your site? Are there certain categories? You'll see on a lot of sites they have like their shop and their About Us section in the different sections, and those are their main navigation. And then within those pages there's other ways to get around to the rest of their site. Another thing to consider with navigation would be to use a sitemap. This helps users get around, helps them know what's available on your site. So those are some things to consider with navigation. When you're dealing with colors and theme, the best advice is to keep it simple. You want colors that are contrasting enough that it's easy to read, it's easy on the eyes. You don't want a really bright green on a white background. That just makes it hard to read. White background, black text is generally a pretty safe bet. If you want a different background color, lots of people like black backgrounds. Make sure that your text is white or a color that's easy to read. Once again, be consistent throughout your site. Keep your text the same font throughout, or if you have a certain, you don't have to keep it the same all the way throughout, but if you want your headers to be a certain text and font size and font kind, and your body to be different, that's fine. And later on, we'll get into style sheets and how to adjust your whole site to different styles of text and colors and things. Use the complementary color scheme. Now, file management. This is an important thing to think about before you start creating pages. You need to be able to maintain your files and maintain your site. You don't want to have multiple copies of the same page and you can't remember which one you saved and which one you made changes on. So file management is important. There's a few guidelines. First, the names of your files should be simple, descriptive, one-word names. The more simple the name, the easier it is. So keep that in mind when you're naming your files. An about page could just be about. Your home page, we'll talk about that in a minute. But the extensions will be either HTML or HTM. Either one works. By default, a lot of your browsers or your web development software will have a specific one that it tends to default to, but you can use either of those extensions, but it has to be one or the other. Your home page should be named index.html or .htm. This is by default. Browsers will look for the index.html page, and that's where it wants to point your website to very first when somebody clicks either on a link to go to your page or they type in your web address. So it's important that you name your very first start page index.html. The other thing to use would be to use folders to organize your files. I like to have an image folder. I like to have a folder for each of my main navigation areas. And so within each of those main navigation areas, I will also have an image folder. You need to figure out what works best for you as far as organizing your files so that you just don't have this huge list of files. Use folders to help with that organization. So to summarize, we need to make sure that we have a purpose for our website and that we know the audience that we're going to target. Be sure to sketch your website's layout and be consistent throughout your layout and colors and themes. Also, it's important to make sure you have a good way to manage your files within your website. Now it's time for you to start to create your very first website by completing the site planning assignment for your first site.